Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back from your breaks. We're starting the second half of the session now. So, over to you, Graham. You can start the session once you're ready.
Thank you very much, Anisha. Okay, welcome back, everybody. So let me just put the slide up and we can get started for this second session on customer focused organization, customer centricity. So, just to summarize what we were talking about before, and just to really emphasize this point, that is that something like 50 to 60% of the impression a customer gets is made in the first 5 or 10% of an interaction: phone call, face to face meeting, an email, the outside of a building, the landing page on a website. It's so important. 55% of that impression is based on visual input, the facial expression, body language, how somebody is dressed, the colors or the layout or the font on a website, the information formatting on an email, whether it's got bullet points and headings and the paragraphs are clear, all the visual content. A tone of voice. Now, you can have tone of voice in an email. Emails can be very stern or very friendly. I need this report by Friday. Please, could you send this report by Friday? I would really appreciate it if you can get this report to me by Friday. So a tone of voice can be heard in emails. And then the actual words, that's what the 7% means. The choice of your words. It's important, but it's not as important as the voice tone and the body language. And I'm going to give you one really important concept that is almost too small to measure, but it's so important, is eye contact. Practice making more eye contact with people for longer and hold the eye contact. Now, in many cultures, they do this much better than we do in Britain. British people are seem to be quite bad at eye contact as a race, as a nation. We kind of avoid this. We sit on trains and planes and read books so we don't have to make eye contact with people. But your customer service experience, where somebody is looking at you quite focused, is much higher than if they're not really looking at your eyes. And by the way, the understanding you have of their experience, of their expression, is much higher if you're making eye contact. So here's an example of first impressions, by the way. Psychologists have analyzed this and they find there's maybe 6 to 8 different facial expressions, only 6 to 8. And everything else, every other facial expression, is a combination or indeed a variation of this. So I don't know if you wanted to, it's a good game to play with your colleagues or partners, is see if you can find a name for some of these expressions. So the one, if you like, at the bottom right, well, they're looking quite thoughtful. The one next to that with a hand over, they're looking at shocked. Then there's angry, and then there's surprised. And then maybe there's judgmental. And there's perhaps disdainful or sad, perhaps. Yeah, that looks a bit sad, that one. Then there's happy. We like happy. And the other one is kind of, I'm not really sure what that one in the top left is. Looking a bit concerned, I think. So this is a big science and still ongoing, I think. But these are the basic building blocks of human expression. Smug or vain, doubt, surprise, love, daydream, pain, mixed emotions, these kind of elements. So learn to understand and if you like, the word the psychologists use is decode, is to try and decipher the look on someone's face. These are very important factors. Now, developing a top-down customer-centric culture. Right, this is something that's very important. I hope to explain this so you understand the customer's needs and preferences in this area. And I'm also going to further explain the importance of exceeding expectations. And of course, that starts by managing the expectation. The bullet points you can see here are really about understanding what customers really want, managing the customer experience, shaping your business around your competitors, managing expectations, making a big difference, the customer personality types, and then we're going to put some examples together of world-class customer service. So let's move on to this. Let's do a first, let's do a little poll. So let's do this up first. Poll number 3. Okay, so I'm going to put a poll on your screen now, and it says, in your opinion, why do customers complain mostly? Is it because they like complaining, a missed expectation, or a mistake? Why do you think customers complain? Which is the biggest reason? If you want to get a chance to vote, I'm just going to keep it open for another 30 seconds. Why do you complain? Do you like complaining? Or do you complain when something is not as you expect, or when something is wrong, a mistake is made? Okay, so it's quite interesting. It's higher on one of these than I expected it to be. All right, so I'm going to pause it now, another few seconds. If you haven't voted and like to, make your mark on the screen. All right, so let's pause there. End the poll, share results. Well, 12% of you think it's because customers like complaining. Actually, you're actually dead right there. 10% of customers, they believe, are what they call chronic complainers. No matter what you do, no matter how good your business or service, they will find something to complain about. Most of you thought 45% it was a mistake. It's something that has gone wrong. But the thing that surprised me is 42% of you picked up the thing that's a missed expectation. Is actually about 80% of the complaints that most organizations receive or they hear about, customers are not happy with, 80% is because something was not delivered or not as they expected. The mistakes, the problems, the things that arrive broken or don't arrive or don't happen that should, and so on and so on, is quite small. It's around 20%. It is much more common that a missed expectation will create a customer unhappiness. By the way, there's also a very few customers that actually take the time to complain. Now, here are some of the things that basically, by and large, customers find to be important. And this is a survey we had a little bit later on. So you'd be glad to know you are with the majority. Most people like what we call value for money, followed closely by customer service. The third one is people keeping their promises and reliability, which is also about consistency. We tend to like things to be the same as customers. Quality and ease of doing business come up very closely, 4 or 5. Now, the way I want you to think about customer service is like a combination lock on a padlock, and there's the numbers, and you've got 5 numbers, and 4 of them are right, and 1 of them is wrong. The lock will not open. So you need all 5 of these to be correct before the customer's experience is seen as really positive. And the customer wants all 5. They don't want 3, they don't want 4, they want all 5. So what do you do, and where does it hit where the customer wants? And the sweet spot is where the value is created. Now, many organizations have to do a lot of customer service things that is not always appreciated by a lot of customers. So, for example, let's take something about being friendly and personable. It might surprise you to know that less than a quarter of people in the world actually care whether you're friendly or personable to them. The great majority of them just want things done. But a significant minority appreciate friendliness and personable service. So the sweet spot varies from customer to customer. If you don't hit that sweet spot, the customer could be frustrated, annoyed, and irritated. When we were talking yesterday, we mentioned the purpose of a business, the vision and a mission. And within that, you obviously have your key drivers in your business, the values, and then you also have the goals and objectives that you're trying to achieve. The promise of your brand will create an expectation. So if I went to buy an expensive brand of shoes or handbag or food of some kind, I would have an expectation based on the reputation of that brand. Let's take someone like Levi Jeans or Armani. I have an expectation about the quality of the garment and the cloth and the fit and the service that goes with that. So they all have to be congruent. They all have to fit together. We have to make sure that the whole circle is complete. In the world of customer service now, we have what we call influencers. Malcolm Gladwell talked about this in his book Tipping Point. He talked about people who recommend, refer, or are seen as trendsetters, even in their group of a small number of people. Of course, this is now amplified on social media with sites like Instagram. So these influencers are very, very important. So always keep coming back to what's our service model and does it align with our mission model. Very simple example. We talked yesterday about BP. Now, how tidy, how clean, how organized, how well presented a garage forecourt is when somebody pulls in to get gas or petrol is part of the experience. It has nothing to do with ecological, environmental issues. It has nothing to do with extracting oil from the ground, but it is all part of the BP model. So if you want to be seen as a quality brand, you have to manage the fact that there is no litter on your forecourt and your attendants are friendly. And when you go in to pay, it's a quick and easy transaction. So the whole purpose and mission comes outwards into the customer service model. And that, by the way, is true for internal customer service. So let's take the vision of an HR department. The HR director will need to set a vision and mission for their department. They have values and behaviors they recognize and encourage and promote. Right first time, competence, friendliness, follow-up, clear information, all these things. Their goals and strategies and objectives might be around the metrics to reduce the number of inquiries, improve satisfaction with their department, and so on. But the promise of their department needs to be set out in a customer service charter. You may have seen these. They're a little old-fashioned now, but they are really important. You want to put this on the wall. 7, 8, 9, 10 principles of customer service. How we value our customers. And that's your brand promise. And this is the important principle. Even if you're a division within a big company, you have your internal customers, you have your internal customer service drivers, and manage your department as if it was a discrete business. You may recognize this from the project management training on the first day. It's a useful tool to assess your competitors with your business. Now, if you're the internal HR department of a company, well, you don't really have competitors, but there are benchmarks. So the number of mistakes, the speed of getting back to people, and those kind of things. So the product quality, as measured by the customer, give that 10 points. The service differentiation. So what are the aspects of those 7, or what are the differences in your service? Price and cost. And then between those, you have a sweet spot. So you're going to get a score here, a matrix. Now, one of the things I just want to differentiate here is that the price is different from the quality as it's different from the service. Often people would in the past would have said, you get what you pay for. Now, I don't know if that's true in today's world. I can buy something at a relatively low cost and have a very high product quality, which is also delivered with a high level of customer service and a very well managed expectation. I can also buy something which is very expensive, have a very good product quality, but a low level of service. So these are the things here. So I'll give you an example. If I sent an email to a customer support department and I got a standard response back saying, thank you for your email. One of our support team will get back to you within the next 10 to 14 days. 10 to 14 days? What's that about? That's crazy, right? So the fact is, I want 10 to 14 hours, not 10 to 14 days. So this is the expectation dynamic of these 3 things. My suggestion is see them as independent of each other. Just because the price is what it is, just because the quality of the product is what it is, the service needs to be independently excellent. Here's an idea that I learned when I was visiting Japan a few years ago. The Japanese model of customer service is extraordinary. Their level of accountability and their philosophy of process is remarkable. And I've never really experienced customer service like it. And I've traveled and lived in over 40 countries. Here's an example. I'm in a Starbucks in a train station, and I'm waiting for a train. I have an hour to wait. So it's really nicely designed. The service is fantastic, as always, with the Starbucks. But I'm watching the staff in this cafe, in the Starbucks, and every 15 minutes, one of the staff would leave the counter, would visit every table, would spray a cleaner on the table and wipe it thoroughly and go on to the next table. Now, there's only 2 or 3 people in the whole Starbucks. It's quite a large area. And she would go around and clean and wipe every table. 15 minutes later, she would do exactly the same thing again. Nobody had sat at the table. It was as clean as it was 15 minutes later. But the process was she cleaned and wiped every table 15 minutes. When I returned to Britain, a few weeks later, I went into Starbucks. I bought my coffee on a tray. I turned to find a seat. I could not find a table that was not covered with dirty cups, plates, or hadn't been wiped. The difference was remarkable. So the secret of customer expectation management is to create a perception and then deliver the reality. There's no good having a customer expectation that wants enjoyable, clean, quick, high quality if you cannot deliver it. So the first thing is it has to be enjoyable, it has to be useful, and it has to be easy. Once again, if I have to send 5 emails and make phone calls, that isn't good customer service. I want it right first time, and I want it answered first query. So I call this mind the gap. If you've ever been to London and you go on the tube trains, you'll know there's a sign that says, and there's an announcement that says, mind the gap between the train and the platform. And a German friend of mine thinks this is so funny. He said, why don't they build the trains so they run closer to the platform? So only a German would think of that, I suppose. So when you look at your customer service, always think about, where is the gap? Where is the difference between my perception or what the company thinks is happening and what the customers think is happening? And that's another thing that we come back to. The customer is always right. If they think your something or other of customer service is not very good, they're right. So always make sure that you deal with that perception versus reality. One of the phrases you hear a lot in customer service is going the extra mile, is doing something over and above, is finding something which is really valued by the customer that might be easy to do, but it's really appreciated. Let me give you 2 or 3 simple examples. You phone through to your IT support desk in your company because your emails aren't working. And they ask you a few questions, they try a few things, but it doesn't seem to resolve the issue. Then the support person says, listen, I appreciate you're busy. Instead of keeping you on hold, why don't you leave this with me and I'll call you back within the next half an hour when I've looked into this. So you say, fine, that's a good idea. 10 minutes later, the person appears at your desk. They've walked up the stairs, they've walked across the floor, and they've come to find you and said, listen, I need to change 1 or 2 of the settings on your machine. We've made some adjustments to the security settings, and I just need to do that. I could talk you through it, but it's quicker if I do it myself for you. Bang. You didn't have to ask, they just did it. So always as a person working in a business, look out for opportunities to go the extra mile. When I used to run a customer service team, I had something I called the ABCD Award. Every week, the 60 people in my team would have to do a secret ballot, and they would write down the name of one of their colleagues who they would want to give the ABCD Award to. And this was a trophy that sat on that person's desk for a week until the next person won the ABCD Award. And by the way, you couldn't vote for the same person who already had the award. It had to be someone different. Above and beyond the call of duty. That's what ABCD stands for. And they would find somebody who had stayed late to do something, dealt with a particularly difficult customer, come up with a good idea, maybe it helped 1 or 2 colleagues, just done something that was over and above what they should have done. Better than normal, better than average, above and beyond. And that's where you add value. And by the way, you may think that these things aren't noticed or appreciated, but somebody in your business will notice it, and you know you've done it, and therefore you feel better about yourself, which is a good benefit. I'm sure you'll agree. To put it simply, here is the phrase that pays. Under promise and over deliver. Always set expectations so you can meet and exceed them. If there was one thing that hallmarks a customer-centric organization, it is this. Don't say anything you can't deliver. Don't promise something that isn't going to happen, right? So this is a kind of key thing here. Here's another example. We all use mobile phones. Many years ago, I did some trading for a big mobile phone company called O2. One of the big challenges is when people buy a new mobile phone SIM card and they want it activated. And they phone up and they give their information, and the person says, okay, that will start the activation process and your telephone will be live within the next 6 to 7 hours. which was on average how long it took. Now, on average doesn't kind of work very well. So what that meant was that sometimes it would take 3 or 4 hours, other times it would take 10 or 15 hours. After 6 hours or so, people would phone up or email and say, you said my phone was going to be working and it's not working, why not? And their customer service people would have to say, oh, I'm ever so sorry, let me see what I can do. And it would all go into this, Then I suggested they tell everybody 24 hours. And they said, Graham, you're crazy, because no one likes hearing 6 or 7 hours. They'd say that's too long. How are they going to accept 24 hours? And I said, well, look, over 50% of the time, you can't do 6 or 7 hours. So you're lying to your customers. That doesn't go down well. Try my way and see what happens. Now, what happened is people would be told, please allow 24 hours for your phone to go live. They go, 24 hours? Can't you do it any faster? And the service person would say, well, yes, usually we can, but sometimes it can take up to 24 hours. 10 hours later, bing, the phone comes on. They're happy. But do you know the most astonishing difference was they stopped phoning up to ask why it wasn't fixed. The calls inbound dropped by over 30%, which means 30% of the calls coming in were people chasing an unrealistic expectation. So when you have it as a process, the benefits are really big. So don't underestimate the power of this particular technique. Let's try one more poll for a moment before we continue. This is about what would annoy you most in a restaurant. Let's launch this poll. Which would annoy you or displease you the most? Having to wait, bored, sticky marks, cold food, mistakes on the bill, slow service, or difficult to park? Give me your feedback on this particular poll and I'll share the results in just a moment. Okay, another 15, 20 seconds. I'd love to know your thoughts on this. You can choose more than one, by the way. You can choose more than one. Which of the following would annoy you and what would make not really too much different? All right. This is interesting. This tells me you're a difficult customer group. All right. Now, I'm going to pause this in just a minute, another few seconds. Make your mark on the page. All of those things, one or none. Right. Okay. So let's pause there for a minute and let's share the answers. So none of us, or the 60% of us, majority of us, would be annoyed or displeased if we had to wait a long time to be seated. Now, this is because first impressions count, and also it will create an impression of feeling valued and important. The next biggest one was slow service when you need something. That's very important. If I need another spoon or I want to order something extra, it's really frustrating and embarrassing if you have to keep trying to get someone's attention, right? There's a restaurant chain in the UK which is not expensive. It's really good value food, and you can order everything from an app on your phone. You don't need to call a waiter. You just want some onion rings. You just want another drink. You go ding, 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 bing, it arrives. You don't even have to leave your table to pay. It takes the money from your phone. Such a genius idea. And like I was saying, the service is not the same as the price and the product. What else we got down the list here? The food's not very hot when it arrives. Now that is annoying, but only 46% said that. And it's not that different from sticky marks on the table. Bored or dull waiter, 25%. Well, it depends how bored or dull they were, I suppose. I find with that, the expectation, by the way, is about the restaurant. If you're used to that, that's just normal, so you don't notice it. Mistakes on the bill, well, that's annoying, but they're usually put right, I suppose. And difficult to park near the restaurant. 22% of you, and that is nearly the same as a bad waiter. Now, interestingly, a dull waiter, a waiter with bad attitude, is controllable by the company that employs them. The parking near the restaurant isn't, but they are both an important part of the customer's experience. So managing the experience is really important. So maybe you could put information on your website where people could park or have valet parking. These kind of things, these kind of ideas will improve the customer's experience. Now, as a restaurant owner, I need to understand my customers and what's important to them for the price and the brand perception I have. If I have a fast food takeaway, they could be very different to a high-end quality restaurant. So it's interesting how a lot of the time it's not just about the food or indeed the way the food is presented. It's about the service wrapper that goes around it. So let me stop that share now. Okay. Now, we know from many of the studies that go on that customer service is about the people. They say there are 3 P's in the customer experience model. There are people, there are products, and the process that's involved in serving a customer. Now, let's look at the moment at the person aspect, the personality types. Some of you may have seen this model before. In the 1960s, a gentleman called Dr. Marston came up with a book called The Effect of Personality. It's the effectiveness of personality, it was called. And he was the first person to begin to understand these dynamics. Now, this is used a lot in in employee recruitment. If you ever have to complete some form of survey when you apply for a job, it almost certainly would assess you for personality type. They also sometimes trying to understand your thinking models, your decision-making process, and indeed your readiness for change, which are all linked, by the way, to these 4. Now, before I start to explain this in more detail, I want to just put a couple of safety notes out here. First of all, people are complicated, all right? So nobody's going to be exactly like any one of these 4. We are more likely to be a bit of one and a bit of another, all brought together. The second thing is people change. People change day to day, minute by minute. If I'm in the office working or talking with my colleagues and the managing director walks in, I might change my personality. No, I might change my behavior. So my behavior is different from my personality. My personality will stay relatively stable, but I do have the flexibility of behaving differently in different situations. So you are not your behavior. And the third thing is, it doesn't matter if this is completely accurate. What does matter is that it's useful to us. It has value. So let me explain some of these differences. If you look at the gray arrows for a moment, on the left-hand side, we have the word controls. On the right-hand side, we have the word emotes. This is your responsiveness scale. How readily somebody shows or hides their emotions. Some people are very static in their expression. And if they're happy or sad, you don't really know. Other people you can read like a poster. They walk in the office in the morning and you know whether they're feeling in a good mood or a bad mood, just by the look on their face and the way they're walking or the way they're holding their shoulders or whatever it is. So that's the responsiveness. And we go from emotion to control. This is the only one of two ways we need to assess someone's personality, a customer's view, if you like. The second one is how assertive they are. At the top, you've got tell. At the bottom, you've got ask. Now, a direct person will be assertive. An indirect person will be passive. This is the thinking, all right? If you're too much of a tell, then you could be seen as aggressive. So we all have a scale, a slider, if you like, of how emotional we are and how assertive we are. These two elements will be a habit. We will be generally more like this most of the time. And this will give us certain personality traits or types. Okay. So if you did a scale of 1 to 10 for control to emote and a scale of 1 to 10 for assertiveness, this will allow you to score yourself in each of these different models, in each of these different boxes. So you can see here, and I'm going to go through this in more detail in a moment and explain the different customer types, how you might serve them, and how you might spot them. People who are tell and assertive would be drivers and expressives. These people would be, I need this done straight away. Why hasn't this happened? I'm looking for something now. They are direct, they don't ask, they tell. An indirect person, in terms of assertiveness, would be analytical and amiable. Let's give you an example of somebody interrupting you at your desk. They come over, they walk over. A direct person will walk up to your desk, make eye contact, and say, I need to talk to you. Do you have a minute? The voice tone goes down. This tells you it's not a question, it's a command. Do you have a minute? Means you have a minute, right? The unassertive person comes over, waits for you to make eye contact, apologizes, and asks a question, and maybe hesitates. I'm sorry to trouble you. I wonder if you have a minute now. Voice tone up makes it a question. The hesitancy, maybe, perhaps. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just not as assertive as the other person. Now, what is right or wrong? Well, this is the secret. People like people who are like they are. So if you're an assertive type, you like dealing with people who are assertive back. If you are unassertive and more indirect, you will appreciate people who are more like you. And you will find direct people maybe slightly challenging or difficult. People like people who are like them. This is a real truism. The other thing I want you to think about is that there's no such thing as difficult people. There's no such thing as difficult customers. They're just different to you. So when a customer comes up to you and says, I need this done now, they're just being assertive. And if you're not like that, you will find that maybe a little challenging. All right. So this is the difference between assertive and unassertive. Now let's look at the other spectrum here, emotional and control. So the red and the green boxes are much more controlled. They don't usually show much emotion about things. They're very, shall we say, matter of fact. Their words are simple and unexpressive. I used to work for a manager who was one of these, not particularly easy to read in terms of their expressions, feelings, or emotions. And if I was pitching them an idea and I'd say, hey, listen, Mark, I've got this great idea. Why don't we? I think it would be really good if we did. And I'd explain the idea. And Mark would sit there and listen without an expression on his face. And I'd have to go, Mark, what do you think? And he would only say one word. Yeah, that's interesting. And over the couple of years I worked with him, I realized he had about 4 or 5 different ways of saying the word interesting. One way meant, no, don't even think about it. That's the craziest idea I've ever heard. And the other one was, yeah, that's interesting, meant we ought to do this. But I was never sure. So I used to have to say, Mark, when you say interesting, do you mean you want to look into this or not do this? And he'd say, well, not do this, of course. Right. So he didn't realize that he wasn't really expressing himself clearly. But from my viewpoint, he was being really difficult to read. If you have customers like that, you have to ask them, is everything okay? Are you happy? And this is also about whether they are proactive or reactive in their communication. On the other side, we've got the blues and the yellows. Now, the blues and the yellows, well, they're kind of our difficult customers. They wear their heart on the sleeve, as they say. They do not make a secret of their emotions. Now, the expressive may tend to exaggerate their emotions, and the amiables show them by accident, right? So they're a little more kind of difficult to read, but they still show their emotions. Okay, and we're going to talk about some other differences as well as we go through. So these are the 4 differences, and you might also begin to think about, where am I on this? Where is my partner? Where is my family? Where are my best friends? Hey, where is my boss? So if you can start to analyze where your boss or your customers are, because your boss is a customer, right? Your boss, your manager, your supervisor, your team leader, they're an important customer. And we know that customers like customers who like to be served by people who are like them. So just be a bit more like them. So let's go through and walk you through this model. Now, drivers as customers are great customers because they're all about getting things done. They can be quite demanding, but they're very clear on what those demands are. They're straight to the point. They're not emotional. They will never get upset about something. They want quick, no fuss, no frills service. They'll make a decision, yes or no. They want answers back quickly. They do not want long explanations. If you try and explain why something hasn't happened, they'll turn around and say to you, no, don't give me all that, just get it done, right? They like ticking things off. They're all about recognition and an achievement, these guys. You'll find quite a few of these in senior management teams, men and women. The question psychologists haven't quite answered yet is, are people made senior managers or put in charge of large operations because of their driver? Or do they become more like a driver when they're given that level of responsibility and accountability? I think the answer is sometimes in between. I think certainly if you are looking after a highly difficult area of business, you have to be determined, you have to be quick thinking, and you have to deliver results. After all, that's what you're there for. So I think that aspect of your personality will develop. Okay, so those are drivers. They just don't dress things up. They just get to the point. There's no emotion. There's no taking it personally. And it's a tell, not an ask. Now, the expressives, if the drivers are managing directors, the expressive is a sales director. They are dynamic. They're more extrovert. They're quite direct and assertive, but they also have this ability to express emotions of enthusiasm, of pleasure, of annoyance, excitement. Now, they often, in the extreme, if you took it out towards the edge, they might exaggerate some of these traits. So they can be very persuasive and motivational because of this. If you work with a colleague, for example, who is like this, they might come over to your desk and go, "Hi, how are you? How you doing? Hey, you're looking well. Hey, do you want a coffee? I'll get you a coffee." And that's because they want something, right? They want a favor. They want to ask you something. So these expressive people, they may come on the phone or an email as a customer, going, this is terrible. Do you know what has just happened? Ding, 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 ding. And they're kind of really exaggerating their emotions. They can turn it on and off, by the way. They have quite a lot of control. They're much more about recognition. They want to be made to feel important. This is a big ego feed they have. The driver's not such a big ego feed. The expressive might be a little more flamboyant. They might have more flashy clothing or gadgets and that sort of thing. The driver will be much more about results, quietly efficient. So you get these people quite quickly. They tend to be in professions where those traits are appreciated. So things like sales, marketing, presentation, teaching, those kind of things, communication, anything with communication, they're in there. All right. They also like humor, and they don't always have a big focus on attention to detail. They're the kind of people that walk into a room and go, hey, what I'm coming in here for, right? So they tend to be a little more kind of free thinking. Now, analyticals, as a customer type, these are going to be more common in a business-to-business or technical environment very often. They like to shop online. They are much more cautious in buying and making decisions. They will do a lot of due diligence and research, buying even the simplest product. They're the people you see in supermarkets reading the back of the label on a product. Expressives just stick it in the basket, particularly if it's on special offer, right? So it's that kind of dynamic we have here. They are, as the name suggests, analytical. They are quite controlled with their emotions. They're much more indirect, though. They were more likely to ask than tell, but they'll do it in an unemotional way. Would you mind if I ask you some questions? They're all about facts and structure and logic. They like agendas. They like reasons. They like well-written, well-structured emails and proposals. They will find it very annoying if information is not clear or it contradicts in some way. They are very slow to come to a decision or to a point. They will act, though, by the way, if there's a clear benefit. If it kind of, as they say in their own words, if it makes sense. It has to make sense. An analytical in their head is making a jigsaw puzzle. They're putting together a puzzle, and they need all those things. Customers like this, you need to make time for them to ask you questions. They will not be satisfied unless they have questions answered. So let's take a very simple example. If you are in the IT department in your business and an analytical fella phones up and says, I can't seem to get my emails working, can you help me? Then if you start asking them questions, what was your login? What exactly happened? They will know the answers to these. And when you've solved the problem, they will want to know why it's happened and will it happen again. So they're very curious about these things. They prefer to see things in writing, and they prefer to have things structured clearly. So always make sure that you change your approach for these type of customers. They don't really respond well to shows of emotion, friendliness, or humor. If you are kind of, hello, how are you? What's your day going like? How's your day today? That will just annoy them because they don't see that's relevant. Well, it's not going very well because my emails aren't working. Can you ask me some questions about my emails? So that's their way of operating in the world. As they say, they make very good air traffic controllers, but very bad comedians. Now, the amiables, these are an interesting group of customers. They're the people. They are very much focused on showing emotions and very indirect. They do not like conflict or upsetting people. They don't want to argue or disagree. They may not be happy, but they won't like to complain. The reds and the blues will complain, the greens and the yellows won't, unless you encourage them. So if you went over to somebody and said, "Is everything okay?" They will pause and, "Yeah, no, it's fine, thank you," which is a way of saying, "No, it's not fine," because they show emotion, and the emotion they're showing is displeasure. Their words are saying one thing, their voice tone is saying another. So always connect with the person first on this one and the problem second. Show that you care, that you take time, that you're patient and relaxed, cooperates. Try and ask the questions that are important. They will be slow to change a view or to make a decision. The blue and the red are relatively quick. The green and the yellow are more thoughtful. One of the things I found with internal customer service with yellows is if you build, let's say, a relationship with them over time, they will be a much, much better person to deal with. Listen to them, go and see how they're doing, follow up issues they've had, make sure it's done correctly, say thank you and please. And over a period of time, they will become very much more responsive to your customer service. You can sometimes tell traits, by the way, in job roles. So a driver might be a managing director or operations manager. Analytical might work in finance or computer programming, engineering, something technical. They, by the way, prefer tasks to people. Amiables might be in customer service, teaching. They might work in the caring professions or HR. They may be something very people orientated. I'm probably missing out a few categories here. And then the expressives are much more where communication required. And there's a great deal of variety in the job role. Expressives tend to act as like a pinball flying around in a pinball machine. They tend to be a lot of energy, but don't respond too well to routine or if you like, rigid ways of working. And if they do that in their job, by the way, they tend to be much more relaxed and free floating outside of work. So put this back into context. Let me just go back to the big chart for a moment. So when you start to deal with a customer, internal or external, or you can analyze your customer groups into these types: drivers, expressive, analyticals, and amiables. And by the way, large organizations now, car manufacturers, I know do this. I know some online websites, some of the online shopping sites, people like obviously Amazon, but some of the smaller sites like ASOS and Boohoo and some of these, Alibaba, for example, will know how somebody is by their ability to make a buying decision on the website, let's say quickly. The length of time you spend looking at a product or service on a website will determine your style of personality. The type of product or service you buy will also determine your personality. Unabandoned items in a basket, well, that's the analyticals and amiables. Maybe also the expressives. Expressives tend to return things more often. So these are the traits. But if you're just working in the office and one of your colleagues comes up to you, you can tell a few clues. Obviously, their job they're in, the way they're dressed, but also think about how they communicate. If they come directly out with something, you suggest something, and they go, "That's not going to work." Okay, that's a driver. If they say, "That's not going to work because," and they give you a very good explanation, that's an analytical. If they go, "That's crazy, that's a stupid idea, what on earth would make you think that's going to work?" That's an expressive. An amiable would go, "Okay, well, that's quite a good idea. I'm not sure it would work though." That's an amiable, because they want to tell you you're crazy, that's not going to work, but they don't want to upset you. So your response would now need to be different to each of these. The driver, you go, why don't you think it's going to work? I think it's going to work. The analytical, you would go, okay, so those are interesting points. I will give you my reasons to why I think it is a good idea. The expressive, go, I'm not crazy at all. You're crazy. Let me tell you why I think it's such a brilliant idea. And you sell it to them. The amiable, you just simply go, okay, so tell me your thinking. Why don't you think it's a good idea? Amiables love being listened to, by the way, and they like to consider things carefully. If you need one of these 4 types to make a decision, the driver will make it quickly. The expressive will make it also quite quickly, but they want to make it themselves. Analytical will make it if you give them enough reasons, and usually if you confirm it in writing. An amiable, my trick with amiables is tell them to go away and think about it and come back when they've made a decision. They quite like this because it takes the pressure off them and they give time to consider it carefully. The first 2, the reds and the blues, do not have such a problem with making a mistake. The greens and the yellows have a problem making mistakes. So when you begin to build your understanding of your customers and you begin to build customer centricity in your business, you have to recognize that one size does not fit all. You need, for example, drivers are the people that are paying for express delivery. They're paying the extra money to get it today or tomorrow. The expressives are paying extra money to perhaps get express delivery, or maybe to buy the more expensive version with all the fancy bells and whistles. The analytical, well, they might buy the most cost effective, the highest value for money, or the most recommended, the one with the most reviews. And the amiable, once again, be careful and choose the most popular, the best selling, and they will not want to waste money. So they will probably wait the longest. The amiables, by the way, and the analyticals will tend to want to go with the flow and do what everyone else says. The other 2 will be much more about making their own mind up. So these ideas are simply just that. They're ideas that will give you an understanding of your customer type, but also how you can have the same service delivered in 3 or 4 different ways. One of the things I know that Amazon and eBay and a few others, Alibaba, have had to learn is that when people go online to purchase, it's usually the drivers and the expressive, and sometimes the analyticals, who are the early adopters. They go online and they're the early first customers. However, in order to grow the market, you need to be able to bring on board more analyticals and more amiables. So that means you need to offer a telephone or a face-to-face customer service. In some parts of the States, Amazon are now opening shops. They have chatbots. They have a telephone number you can call, because amiables and analyticals like to either talk to a human being or gather more information, and they don't want to just take everything at face value. So you have to tailor your customer service to these different types of personality. So let's look at a customer service example or 2. One of the things I will share with you that is how businesses become more customer centric is they have role models. They look at the ideas, they look at the ways of working that the best businesses, the best organizations are currently doing, and they copy them. Okay, not copy, Graham, learn from them, let's say. Let me give you a very clear example. If you went into an Apple store anywhere in the world, it would be a unique experience. There isn't too many stores, too many shops, certainly computer shops, that look quite as stylish and quite as unique as an Apple store. The service model they used in Apple was borrowed and based on the service manual from the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Now, this is fine because the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, and you can go and see this online, make their customer service manuals and philosophy free for anyone to use. Their goal in the world, their mission is to deliver great customer service. And the more people doing that, the better. So the customer service model was based on that of the Ritz-Carlton. And this literally came from the Apple executive visiting various hotels and realizing the Ritz-Carlton model of service was a little different to the other good hotels he was staying in. And he began to model it and ask questions and see the examples and so on. And they built that into the Apple Store model. If you went to work in the Apple Store, and I don't know if this is still true today, but it was even a couple of years ago, you would go on a training course which would last between 1 to 2 weeks. And you would only be employed, by the way, if you met two important criteria. One, you were a complete and Apple lover, right? You want to be an Apple fanatic. And the second is you're a great people person. So one is you're a geek with people skills, if you like. That's it. So the quality, the reliability, the support you give people, the ability to perform well for customers, to create an outstanding experience and deliver satisfaction are the 6 elements that you would copy. And the question is, how does the winner or the leader in your business do this? How do they deliver quality? How do they love reliability? What is the level of support they give? What's the performance, the experience, and level of satisfaction? Now, it doesn't matter, by the way, if you happen to run an engineering business and you model yourself on, let's say, an online fashion store, because these 6 traits are universal. You may have seen a vacuum cleaner they do other things now, called Dyson. They do these amazing dryers they have in restrooms. Well, innovation is a big thing in Dyson, but so is customer experience. The usage, the instructions, the usability has to be really high. If there's a problem, if something goes wrong, the support level is also very high. Cisco is another one. Cisco as an organization has developed over the last 20 years to be a major force in the world. So has Oracle. And they've all based their service model on the leaders in their industry. In this case, it was IBM and also Amazon. So they began to learn from others. They look at their ability to respond to customer issues based on, if we were Amazon, if we were IBM, how would we do this? IBM, by the way, many, many years ago was the leaders in customer excellence. One of their sales lines that IBM account managers would use is, nobody ever got fired for buying an IBM mainframe. So if it went wrong, it would be fixed really well, and it would be fixed quickly to maintain the integrity and the reputation of the senior management team that invested in IBM. Because in those days, when you went for a particular manufacturer, everything had to be with that manufacturer. So the promise of customer service is absolutely important. And one of the things I would suggest as an individual, but also as a team or a business manager, is begin to study real life examples of customer service and how you can then take that and use it in your business, using all the phrases we've used already. And I'm going to share with you one example and then talk about some of the examples I mentioned earlier on. Right? So being able to go above and beyond the customer service experience is important. I was flying back from Manchester once into London, and then that evening on to Madrid for a business assignment. And I had a business assignment in Madrid which started at 9 o'clock the next morning. So I left Manchester. The flight was overbooked. I eventually got a seat on this flight, and I flew into London with only minutes to spare before my connecting flight to Madrid. Guess what? I missed it. I went to the service desk and I started to make let's call it an unhappy customer scene. This is ridiculous. Because your flight was late, now I've missed my connection. I have to get to Madrid the next day, etc., etc. The customer service person was understanding and trying hard, but it was saying, listen, there's no way I can get you to Madrid tonight. You have to fly out tomorrow. The first flight is 8 o'clock, gets you in at 10 o'clock. I said, that's not going to work. I have to be at 9 o'clock. So this argument went on. And he was trying to fly me via Tenerife or Schiphol or somewhere, and none of it was working. So in the end, I said, this is ridiculous. I have to get to Madrid tonight. So he went away in the back. He said, just a moment, sir. And he came back a few minutes later and he said, how many of you are traveling? And I said, well, just me. He said, all right, I've got two choices for you, Mr. Phelps. Number one is we put you in a hotel. We get you on a flight tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. You make one stopover, you will be in Madrid at 9:30. The second is we rent you a private jet. It's going to cost you £3,000. You'll get to Madrid tonight. Which would you want? I said, well, I want the private jet, but I don't think my company's going to pay for that. So let's take the hotel and the flight in the morning. Now, I liked the way they were thinking. And that's the key to customer centricity. If you've built a customer-centric organization, it means you've empowered the people that serve customers to do whatever they can and think of whatever they can think of to serve customers above and beyond their expectation. And even if you can't solve the problem, you can always make the customer feel special. So let's look at one or two examples, and then we'll move into some questions. First of all, a little poll. Okay, this poll says, when companies remember you as a returning customer and say, oh, welcome back, Mr. Phelps, do you like it, dislike it, think it's just a trick, a technique to get you to spend money? Give me your views before we look at some examples. Okay, this is interesting. I like these very interesting statistics coming through. It might surprise a few of you. Please give it a chance to vote. What do you like, dislike, or just see it as a technique? Okay, another 15 seconds just to finish this off. Share your votes. All right, so last few. Do you like it, dislike it, or see through it as a technique? All right, I'm just going to end the poll now. Let's pause that. Try these polls, by the way, on your colleagues and your friends. You'll be interested to see the difference. 67% of you like that approach, where you're remembered. 5 of you dislike it. And about a quarter of you see it as, well, it's just a trick to get you to spend more money. Now, the fact is, it might be a technique to get you to spend more money, but people still like it. If I went on my Amazon website, I logged in and went onto Amazon, and you went on Amazon, we would both see slightly different home pages. The recommendations, the information would be slightly different because Amazon personalizes things. It remembers you. And that's the whole purpose, of course, of the cookie approach. But even before that, learn to recognize people's names, learn to recognize their voices, and remember the details that you held about them previously. It's one of the easiest ways to make people feel important and significant is remembering your customer. It's one of those little techniques that's so important. As I say, little things matter most to customers. Now, here are some companies that I would recommend you go away and look at how they run their business. Nearly all of these companies take time and take energy to be customer focused, and many others besides. The interesting thing about customer service, though, is if I said, oh yeah, Disney, they're very customer focused. I love going to the Disney store. Somebody else would go, oh, I hate Disney. I dislike the store. I won't even go in. So it's very, very much about the eye of the beholder. Here are some more organizations that I would recommend you study. Um, Apple, we've mentioned. Even if you're not an Apple user, talk to people who are. The times they do things for free, the times they go above what they should do, extraordinary. The Ritz-Carlton hotel chain, as I've mentioned, or any major hotel chain of that sort of 4 or 5 star. Somewhere online, you'll find the Ritz-Carlton hotel philosophy, their training manuals. Really good place to start to understand what the customer service model is they use. What I particularly like is the anticipation of need model. It's just kind of really makes sense, but it's so great. So let's look now at how we respond to the voice of the customer. Best and worst customer service. Interestingly, if you look at the worst customer service I've ever experienced, it's a company called Ryanair. Ryanair is just like, they just don't care about customers. They're just awful. I still use them. I have no idea why. It's because they go lots of places I need to go, and they have a lot of flights going out. And I know the expectation. I know it's not going to be the best customer service in the world, so I'm kind of ready for it. They are just so rude to people. You would not believe it. Just treat customers like objects. Terrible. And you can learn a lot, by the way, by bad customer service you can for good. Now, one of the crazy things about being customer centric is you love it when customers complain. You want to make it really easy for customers to moan at you, not about you. The worst kind of customer complaint is where they open up their Twitter account, they go online and write you a terrible review, or they moan about you. So appreciate the complaint, thank the customer for sharing it, apologize, make sure they really understand you're sorry for it, listen carefully. If you're face-to-face, nod and take the time. Don't try and interrupt them and give a reason or a voucher or explain, but always show empathy. Most of the time, the reason customers complain is because they want to be listened to and they want an apology. They're not trying to get something for nothing. So make sure that you have an easy way of getting customers to contact you. A phone, an email, a message box, a WhatsApp number, and best of all, perhaps contact them. You need to resolve your complaints quickly, and best of all, make sure you never take it personally. It's very rarely meant personally. If you match your customer service needs to the Maslow model of motivation, you'll recognize that the top two, the actualization and recognition, are one of the reasons why customers complain. You've not made them feel important or valued. You've upset their motivational pattern, and you need to put it right. So reevaluate the customer experience as customer demands change. The customer's expectations are changing over time. They're also changing because of the actions of your competitors. Because one company does a certain thing in a certain way, everybody should respond in the same way. So understand, identify, change and implement, and then measure the results of the changes. Omnichannel is the way forward for a customer-focused organization. You need to make it as many touch points as possible. I've noticed literally in the last 12 months how many websites now have these chat bots that pop up, because it's a very popular thing with customers. So as many of these things you can think of, put into your customer service mix. The digital touch points, of course, are many-fold. Every different social media site, online ads, third parties, blogs, affiliate websites. And this in itself is a science. And more customers, by the way, are moving on to the web almost as an exclusive way of dealing with customers. Banking is one of the big areas, and financial services too. So when it comes to leading other people in your team or your company, set a vision, train them, run coaching sessions, talks, online learning. There's a video I recommend by an ex-head of customer service at Disney called Building a Customer Service Culture. It's a really good short video. It's on the link I've put on my sheet. He says, hire on attitude, train on skills. Definitely. Always hire on a positive customer service attitude and train the skills they need. Reward service excellence. Listen and support your staff when they're dealing with customers. Lead by example. You have to be customer service focused with your customers, and I mean internal customers, and then measure service performance. What gets measured gets done and gets rewarded and gets improved. So when you lead by others, leading by example, here are just a few tips. Training, keeping your promises, being helpful, addressing complaints your staff may have, listening to people, answering the phone quickly and promptly and returning calls and emails, do something extra and go the extra mile. If you do that as a manager, if you do that as an individual in a business, others will follow your lead. The customer loyalty chain is linked to customer satisfaction, and customer satisfaction is linked to customer experience. So we've covered many of these areas before in this talk. Just make sure that you understand that link. Processes matter. Keep customers loyal to their favorite product or brands. If you think about oil or petrol or gasoline for a moment for a car, is there any difference between Esso and BP petrol? Well, if you're technical, you'll probably tell me there is. To the consumer, it's about the brand. It's about the perception. It's about how I feel being a customer of that organization. It could be about how local or how good the service is in the shop and the store. So all these things build into brand loyalty and customer loyalty. So just before we go to questions, just want to re-emphasize these examples. It doesn't matter what your business does. It doesn't matter what your organization is. Whether you're an internal, say, maintenance department or an HR department, or whether you're having you're buying tools for your manufacturing, or you're having vehicles serviced, the product is the core, the processes around the outside, and the people is what delivers customer experience. So make sure that you become a customer-centric organization. And if you're working in a customer-centric organization, make sure you can understand the definition of customer excellence your business has. So we've got about 12, 15 minutes. Let's just pause on the slides. We've covered the slides. There is a quiz I would recommend you take to try and test your knowledge of today's talk. But let's go back and look at the question box, Anisha, and see if there's any questions there that catch your eye, and I will do my best to answer them.
Sure, Graham. And before I start asking you questions, I'd just like to announce, guys, please don't drop out. Once we are done with the Q&A round, I will be giving you a few instructions on how to take your final assessments this Saturday. So kindly don't drop out of the session. And okay, so back to questions. I have one from Jude, and Jude wants to know, do you think it is better to be extremely customer focused, or do you think it is better to divide your focus between the customer and the product?
Okay, do I think it's good? Well, in a very technical environment, maybe like website support or medicine or insurance, clearly you have to focus a little bit on the product. But my suggestion is you see the product through the customer's eyes. You see the customer's needs, wants, requirements, perception of your product. if, for example, you're selling business insurance, public indemnity insurance, and you need to make your documents easy to read, easy to follow, and your pricing clear and understandable. Um, the product may be great, the product may be fantastic. You may have superb insurance policy with great underwriters, but if the client finds it difficult to contact you or doesn't understand the policy benefits, that isn't going to work. So, me, focus on the customer, because the customer's perception is right. If something isn't clear or understandable, then you have to understand their viewpoint. Design great products and services and build the customer service around it. I think there's a great book by Julian Richer called The Richer Way. And he said, good customer experience is good products plus excellent service. So I would see good products as a starting point and then develop it further with excellent service. So I hope that answers your question. There might be exceptions, but that's my basic rule, I think.
Thank you for answering that, Graham. So the next question, I saw about 4 or 5 people asking a similar question. And the question is it possible for a customer to have more than one personality type?
Yes, it is actually, because it's a behavior. And they may behave slightly differently with their family, with their work colleagues, and when they're a customer. So some people, when they're a customer, become, let's say, very bossy. When they go into a restaurant or they phone a company up, they become quite bossy, and they become very intolerant. And yet, with their friends, they can be very easygoing and very happy. We find that customers sometimes are difficult because customers think that's how you get something done. They know that sometimes service companies respond to angry customers better than nice customers. So, you've got to see through that. Sometimes customers pretend a personality type, but eventually they will let slip and show their true colors, as it were. So yes, I do. I think people behave in different ways in different situations, particularly under stress. If you have an upset customer, they may respond very differently to their normal personality. Yeah, it's a very good question. Many companies, by the way, also have specialist staff dealing with very angry customers. Yeah. Okay, another question, please, Anisha.
Sure. So the next question is from an anonymous attendee. He says, there are several occasions when a company is unable to maintain the expectations of its customer, and that leaves the customer unsatisfied and furious. So, how do you think we can manage such a situation?
Okay, tricky situation. How do you manage such a situation? Well, um, one of the ways is to go back to the under promise over deliver. So make sure that somebody is not over promising. In the sales talk and the sales training, I did mention sometimes salespeople over promise. Yeah, no problem, we can do that. Um, just to get the sale. As soon as you know something is going to be wrong, as soon as you know something is going to be late or not delivered or the price is incorrect, tell the customer in advance. So if I'm waiting at home for an engineer to come and fix my air conditioning, and I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm waiting, and they don't turn up, and I phone the company and I say, where is the engineer? And they say, oh, they couldn't make it today. Why couldn't you phone me? I could have gone back to work. I could have gone out with some friends. So if you can't make it today, you phone the customer and say, hey, look, it's the I've just been delayed on this job, or my van's broken down, or my dog is at my screwdriver, or some excuse, right? I can't make it today, but I can be there first thing in the morning before 10 o'clock. You're going to be much, much better receptive than if they just don't turn up. So I guess what I'm saying is manage the expectation if you can. And if you have to deliver bad news, do it quickly and do it early rather than pretend the customer won't notice. And there's a real art form in that, by the way. A really good technique of, I'm ever so sorry, but these kind of techniques are very important. And if one of your colleagues, by the way, is always over promising, then have a word with them, because they often set you up for a problem. They always, salespeople are terrible. They go, yeah, yeah, well, listen, if you have any problems at all, give customer service a call. Okay. I just supported one of the questions about my slides, by the way, and I used a couple of techniques here. The new version of PowerPoint has a design ideas function. I also use a website called Pixabay, which allows me to get copyright-free pictures, and I try and keep the words small and the pictures high. It just makes it easier to follow, I think. And I also have lots of different models and diagrams and charts I can use. So I think two more questions, please, Anisha, if you may.
Sure. Okay, so the next one is an observation that has been shared by Mohammed, and he just wants to know your thoughts about it. So he says, you mentioned that most complaints from the customers are due to missed expectations,
Yeah.
but don't you think it is the responsibility of the customer to educate themselves about the product that they are purchasing and not make a blind purchase?
Yes, I do, and in fact, that's the basis of most customer law. It's in the UK. It's called Cab Tantor, which is buyer beware. Um, they should satisfy themselves that what they're buying or using is right for their needs, and they should educate themselves as to what the time limits are. Um, that doesn't really help you if you have an angry customer on the phone or in front of you saying, "No one told me this," and you say, "Well, it's on our website, sir." So that's kind of difficult. The fact is that customers are more demanding today than they ever have been. They have more choice than they ever have done, and the level of service is huge. I mean, just some of the fantastic service levels we have now is amazing. So always try and understand that, and take the responsibility for pointing something out, that educating the customer if you need to. So, for example, let's imagine you're selling something, or you're serving the customer, and you say, "Look, just to let you know, next time this happens, it would be easier if you did this or this." Right? So these kind of things. But the customer centric organization forgives the customer for being a bit of an idiot. Okay, they forgive the customer for not reading the instructions properly. I love the thing IKEA. Okay, so IKEA used to have this thing, and you go around this amazing like maze in IKEA, and people always complain, "Oh, I can never find my way out, never find my way out." Right? And for years, IKEA refused to do that, put a map in, because they want people to get lost and have to walk all the way through the store to leave, because that's how they trap you to buy things. It's absolutely true. Today, they have little cut throughs, little shortcuts, and you can just nip through and go down the stairs. They have a map and signs so you can find your way out quickly, because they've listened to customers. So it's kind of interesting how, yes, you hope customers pay attention and educate themselves, but you have to also allow for the fact that some of them might not do. In the personality styles, by the way, the expressives and the amiables will not pay as much attention to information as the other two. All right, good question. I like that. One more, Anisha, and then just to remember to everybody, please stay on online, stay in the room when I finish, because Anisha has some important information for you. So one more question before I hand back to you, Anisha.
Thank you. And the next question is from Ahmed. And Ahmed wants to know, from a customer's point of view, do you think that first impressions are the most important encounter?
Yes, and it's not just my opinion. The science shows us that you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. It's a very important part of unconscious bias. So if you want to read about that, the unconscious bias, whatever our first impression is, will set our opinion and our experience until it's otherwise proved differently. If somebody walked up to you and they're very well spoken and very well dressed, you will think they're a nice person, intelligent, well educated, and successful. It's an automatic human response. So yes, I do. Absolutely. All right, good. So thank you to everybody for so many great questions and the polls and listening. And I've really enjoyed sharing these ideas with you all of this week. I hope I've explained the ideas, but also made you curious to go away and now do some more research on these very important topics. So Anisha, can I hand back to you to direct the group and close the session?
Sure, yeah. And thank you so much for answering all the questions. You've been a wonderful presenter, Graham. All the sessions were truly very informative. Also, I'd like to thank everyone present here for participating in the business skills training. And thank you everyone for being so interactive. Without taking much time, I'd like to quickly cover on a few instructions on how you're supposed to take your assessment, which is scheduled this Saturday. It's on the 13th of June. The first thing, the assessments link will be activated only for the participants who have more than 80% of attendance. You can take the final assessment on our LMS portal Prism. I'll just share and show you how it'll look like. So I hope everyone can see my screen. This is how my dashboard looks like. So once I go to business skills course, I can just scroll down and take the final assessment here. It will be towards the end of your course. Please ensure you go through all the instructions. The assessment is not active now. The assessment will only become active on the 30th of June. It will be active for a window of 2 hours. That is from 12 in the afternoon until 2 in the afternoon. So it's only for 2 hours from 12 p.m. to 2 p.m. Riyadh time. Kindly don't get confused about the time when you're supposed to take the assessment. Your assessment will have 30 multiple choice questions and you'll have a duration of 60 minutes to complete the assessment. If you are not submitting your assessment in 60 minutes, the system will auto submit it. So please be very careful while you're taking your assessment. In case you're starting the assessment after 1 p.m., you will not get your full 60 minutes to take the assessment. The assessment will auto close at 2 p.m. and all your answers will be auto submitted at 2 p.m. So ensure you start your assessment keeping the time in mind. I'm going to pause the share now, just 1 second. So we are now going to run 4 polls to capture your feedback for this training. I'll run each poll for 2 minutes and would request everyone to participate completely while answering these polls. So here goes the first poll. So this is in regards to the activity that we did yesterday. And we'd like to know if you like that activity. If yes, we'll try to do that activity more often in our upcoming sessions. Guys, I'm going to run the first poll for another 30 seconds now. if you have not voted, please vote now. Okay, so guys, I'm going to end this poll in another 2 seconds and we'll start the new poll. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so launching the second poll now. Okay, so I'm going to run the second poll for another 30 seconds. Kindly participate. Your feedback is very important for us. Okay, so I'm ending the second poll now and I'm going to launch the third poll. Just a moment. Okay, here goes the third poll. This is more to do with how to define the curriculum, the content, the topic. Was it relevant to your skills and understanding? So I'm going to run it for another 2 minutes. Okay, guys, so 30 more seconds for the third poll. If you haven't shared your feedback yet, please share it now. Yes, I'm ending the third poll and I'll launch the fourth one. This is the last poll. And here comes the last poll. Guys, 30 more seconds and then I will end the last poll. Please share your response with us. Thank you. Okay, so I'm ending the last poll now. Thank you for your active participation and thank you for staying back to answer to these feedback polls. In case you have any further, if you need any further clarification in regards to your final assessment, or if you have any doubts in regards to your attendance, please reach out to us via chat on Prism, or you can write us an email at teamdxp@knowledgehut.com. We look forward to seeing you guys in our upcoming cloud computing training, which is starting from Sunday onwards. Thank you, Graham, once again for all your contribution. Bye, everyone, and have a lovely weekend ahead.
Thank you. Cheerio, everybody. Good luck next week. Bye-bye.
Bye.